Akron, Ohio, in 1935, you could sit in your living room and hear voices. Voices from Akron, yes, but also voices from Cleveland, New York, Los Angeles, even London. In homes where just a few years earlier, the evening's entertainment might have consisted of reading aloud or maybe a sing-along, top-flight singers and comedians were suddenly available to entertain, all at the flick of a switch.
Tell me, Mr. Moody, what are your feelings about the radio?
I don't hold with furniture that talks.
In 1935, in that city, into that world of voices traveling through the air, Robert Hagen was born, in this house, which still stands in a still quiet part of town. Like almost everyone else born that year, he grew up listening to the radio. He was captivated by the mighty news voices of the Second World War, Lowell Thomas, H.V. Kaltenborn, and Edward R. Murrow. He also delighted in the comedy of Fibber McGee and Molly.
Where are the suitcases?
Right here in the hall across.
And he couldn't get enough of sports on the radio, especially his beloved Cleveland Indians. But unlike almost everyone else born that year, Bob had a special fascination with radio that went far beyond listening. It was to be a lifelong passion and his life's work. Bob's father, Hans, was a postal clerk and president of the Akron local of the Postal Clerks Union. He instilled in young Bob a passion for unions, the working man, and the underdog. Bob's mother, Adeline, was a homemaker whose influence helped shape Bob into the honest, loyal, and modest person he was. Bob's work ethic was evident early. He never missed a day of school. He learned to speak up for the little guy and to act on his principles. This would cause him some trouble more than once in his career. His lifelong love of sports also started in childhood. In an open field near his home, the neighborhood kids played baseball in the spring and football in the fall, and the normally low-key Bob was a surprisingly competitive player. Bob graduated from Akron's Bucktail High School in 1953 and enrolled at nearby Kent State University, at that time still relatively obscure. It was at Kent State that Bob got his first chance behind a microphone at WKSU, the college's 10-watt educational station. Bob did the news and called ball games. It was clear the young Hagen was talented. He was soon appointed chief announcer. In July 1956, Bob got his first professional job, a part-time gig at Akron's WADC.
This is the News at 10, Bob Hagen reporting. The news is brought to you by Con Ford in Cuyahoga Falls. Some good news about that later, but first here's the news of Akron and the world.
Bob's crisp, clear style was engaging, and it got him an offer of full-time work at another Akron station, WHKK. As Bob's career was taking off, so was his love life. While at Kent State, he met fellow student Marquita Floyd. Keita loved Bob's wit, good looks, and great common sense. He loved her beauty and intelligence. The two laughed at each other's jokes, shared a passion for sports, and had a similar outlook on life. They fell in love and were married in 1958. Bob was starting a family and needed an income commensurate with that responsibility. He was ready to move to the big time. That meant Cleveland. It seemed possible. Akron radio talent was frequently being called up to Cleveland. Alan Free, the father of rock and roll radio, got his start in Akron before being called to the majors. Bob wasn't far behind.
Wonderful WHK! Wonderful WHK, AM and FM radio, Cleveland!
In 1958, he was hired at WHK, one of the premier rock and roll stations in the country, and home to such innovators as Pete Myers, who invented his Mad Daddy persona while working with Bob in Akron.
924 in the Mellow 4, creeping up on 925. After headline news from the land of the blues, more Mellow and jive.
Realizing that the home of Mad Daddy might not be the best environment for doing serious news, Bob moved on to another Cleveland station with a more substantial news commitment, WERE.
Listen on the hour and half hour, 24 hours a day around the clock for the latest WERE news. Bob Hagen reporting for Gray Drug with a reminder that 99 out of 100 times, Grays just won't be undersold.
It was at WERE that Bob honed his skills as a reporter, covering the sensational case of Sam Shepard and scoring an exclusive interview with the former Axis Sally. The young newsman was also a family man. Bob and Keita had been joined by their much-loved daughters, Cheryl and Laura, and son Kenneth. Bob was in no position to be out of a job. In 1962, AFTRA, the American Federation of Radio and Television Artists, tried to organize WERE. It was a tense, dramatic time. Word got out that announcers who insisted on joining the union would find themselves unemployed. Everyone stopped paying their union dues. Everyone except Bob. Bob paid the price for staying true to his values. But the blow was soon softened. He was immediately picked up by the biggest station in Cleveland.
Stay tuned for the news. KYW News.
While he continued to cover the routine stories that make up much of radio news, Bob was drawn to focus on the burgeoning civil rights movement in Cleveland. His contacts among civil rights leaders enabled Bob and KYW to provide superior coverage of one of the most important issues of the day. In 1965, Bob was made news director. Shortly after this promotion, Bob got caught up in one of the strangest episodes in radio history.
You're in tune with KYW, Philadelphia, 1060 on your dial.
10 years earlier, through some convoluted maneuvering, NBC had forced Westinghouse to trade its Philadelphia stations for NBC's stations in Cleveland. In 1965, the FCC ruled that this trade was improper, and the swap was ordered reversed. KYW and Bob were going to Philadelphia. Westinghouse had recently embarked on a risky radio experiment, an all-news format at WINS New York, something critics said would never work. But it seemed to be working, and they wanted to see if the experiment could be successfully repeated at KYW. Bob was put in charge of implementing the nonstop news wheel in Philly. He pulled it off.
This is Dick Harris, General Manager of KYW Philadelphia, and I now present to you, the people of Philadelphia and the Delaware Valley, KYW News Radio, all the news, all the time.
All news and only news. This is KYW News Radio at 12 noon, and I'm Steve Porter.
KYW became the nation's second successful all-news operation, with Bob Hagen as editor-in-chief. Philadelphia was big. Chicago was bigger.
WCFL, Chicago.
In 1967, Bob got a call to join the news department at WCFL, a top 40 operation owned by the Chicago Federation of Labor, of all things. This was an age when even rock and roll stations did news, and lots of it. WCFL's large news department was considered the best in the Windy City. One of Bob's first assignments for WCFL took him to Detroit. It was the summer of 1967. The Motor City was burning.